The Blackhawks prospects were in action this weekend in Minnesota while Spencer Knight signed a new contract. Sure feels like hockey season is back.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Got a great show in store for all of you today as Spencer Knight, who I just talked about a couple of days ago, has signed a new 3-year contract. I'll get into my full thoughts on that, plus how the Blackhawks fared this weekend in the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. And then in segment 3, I'll break down the NHL Network's top prospect pools. But first, just a quick reminder to please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. I put a lot of work into these episodes each and every day, and subscribing is the best way that you can go and show some support. And also, if you want to check out my new Blackhawks written content, go and take a peek at Chicago Hockey Now. But happy Monday, Blackhawks fans. I know it's not an easy one here as a tough beatdown for the Chicago Bears yesterday to the hands of the Detroit Lions. Not very good. But on the bright side, we got some good stuff to talk about regarding our Chicago Blackhawks as Spencer Knight is the latest young goalie with a new contract. And like I said, I just talked a couple of days ago right here on the pod about how Dustin Wolf's new long-term deal with the Calgary Flames and also Lucas Dostal's contract extension that he signed earlier this summer with the Anaheim Ducks, how they will help lay the groundwork for Spencer Knight's next deal in Chicago. Well, I certainly didn't expect it to come so soon. 3-year contract extension for Spencer Knight with a $5.83 million cap hit. Of course, it's not going to kick in until the start of the 26-27 season because Knight still has 1 year left on his current deal with a $4.5 million AAV. And that was the reason why I am a little bit surprised to see this deal happen so soon, Blackhawks fans. I just figured that it was more likely going to come, sometime during the season or maybe not even until next summer, just because Knight is still a little bit raw to the starting goaltender role. And listen, I have a lot of confidence that Knight is going to become the number one here in Chicago. And clearly the Blackhawks do as well by giving him this contract extension. He's got the upside. He's been a high level goaltender prospect for quite a while, obviously selected 13th overall in the 2019 NHL draft. And from what we have seen from him in his NHL action, both 15 games with the Blackhawks last year and in his previous stint with the Florida Panthers, as he certainly has the capabilities for a guy who's still only 24 years old. So I have a lot of confidence in Knight. Like I said, the Blackhawks do as well. Kyle Davidson has spoken highly about Knight since they acquired him, but again, he only really has about the 15 games that he played with the Blackhawks last year in a true number one goaltender position. So it's just kind of a little bit hard to gauge necessarily what his value is right here, right now. And that's why I thought the contract was going to come a little later, because this season is just going to tell us a good amount about, well, again, we have a fairly good idea about what Spencer Knight is. This season is just going to tell us a little bit more and make things a little bit more clearer. So that was my idea behind, my thoughts behind why this news on Saturday morning surprised me a little bit. But undoubtedly, Blackhawks fans, I feel like this is great value for Spencer Knight right here, right now, considering that, like I just mentioned, he has a $4.5 million cap hit on his current contract, getting less than a $1.5 million raise for a guy who, again, I believe is going to become the number one goalie here in Chicago long-term, has the chance to be another really savvy bargain, team-friendly contract given out by general manager Kyle Davidson. And the tenure, again, I think that makes sense given the timing of when these two sides reached upon an agreement, because I am confident in Spencer Knight, as I've already stated, but giving him a 6 or 7 year deal right here, right now, I think it would have been a little too risky for the Blackhawks. I don't think it would have been the wisest move from their perspective. So I think this is a good bridge deal that'll take us into the next stage of Spencer Knight's career when he's, 28, 29 years old, and we have a real good understanding of exactly where he's at in his career. And just comparing this contract that he signed on Saturday morning to the two extensions that we've seen that I outlined earlier last week, and Dustin Wolf, what he signed with the Calgary Flames, and what Lucas Dostal signed with the Anaheim Ducks. It was a 5-year deal for Dostal and Anaheim with a $6.5 million AAV. And for Dustin Wolf, it was a 7-year deal, a longer-term contract with a $7.5 million cap hit. So for Spencer Knight to be signing for close to $1 million less per year than what Lucas Dostal signed on for, when I feel like Dostal, what he did last year and what he's done in his young career with the Anaheim Ducks kind of progressed with that group together. I feel like that's what Spencer Knight is going to be doing these next couple of years for the Chicago Blackhawks here as well. So not too much to like compare each other's numbers, but for Spencer Knight to sign for, again, nearly $1 million less than what Dostal has, and just to speak bluntly, he's put up the better numbers of the two at this point, I think, again, goes to prove why it was a really good deal here for general manager Kyle Davidson. And it's another key young core piece that he has signed on for the future as well. Alex Vlasic, obviously last April, signed a 6-year contract extension, carrying a $4.6 million cap hit. I mean, obviously at that time, we weren't sure what the future NHL salary caps were going to rise to, and we didn't know that they were going to have this massive leap, but $4.6 million for Alex Vlasic, who I believe is going to be a top pairing left-handed defenseman long-term. That is just a marvelous deal. And then, of course, we also saw my guy, Frank the Tank Nazar, sign a 7-year contract extension earlier this summer with a $6.591 million AAV. Feels like, some people believe it's too much right here, right now, but I'm definitely okay with it. The Blackhawks and myself are very, very confident that Frank Nazar is going to be a key puzzle piece here of the future. And now Spencer Knight, obviously not the 6-year deal we saw for Vlasic or the 7-year deal we saw for Nazar, but to have him signed on for 3 years at $5.83 million for a guy who, again, is going to become our number one goaltender, that is one heck of a bargain. And, thinking about the 27-28 seasons, 28-29, having Knight signed to that AAV is hopefully the Blackhawks will be a better squad, and they'll be, hopefully contending in the Stanley Cup playoffs once again. That is a very good deal to have your number one goaltender at. And then I feel like I should also mention, even though he's not technically a key young piece, Ryan Donato signing a 4-year contract extension this summer at $4 million per year clearly shows that he cemented himself as part of the core moving forward during that time that he's under contract for here with Chicago. All 4 of those deals, I think, are really good internal contracts handed out by general manager Kyle Davidson. Let me know in the comment section below, Blackhawks fans, how you feel about Spencer Knight's new 3-year deal and how you feel that Kyle Davidson has done as well with this group of young internal free agents that have received new contracts here over the last, 12 to 15 months. But there is my breakdown on Spencer Knight's 3-year extension here in Chicago. I also love to see that in celebration of his new contract here, Spencer Knight spent the day celebrating at Wrigley Field, where the Cubs were actually honoring Anthony Rizzo. Still can't believe Rizzo didn't catch that home run ball, by the way, but Knight shared on Instagram that he was at the game at Wrigley attending. Certainly has the money to afford those, $18 beers that they're handing out at Wrigley these days. But like I said, full thoughts there on the Spencer Knight contract extension. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, make sure to stick with me as I got tons of takeaways from the Blackhawks prospects in the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors, which is Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. But that's why there is Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, super easy-to-use interface, both available on your laptop and your phone. And Monarch even does the heavy lifting for you so that you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, deals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally, feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks any longer. Go and use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com, and you'll also get half off on your first year. Again, that's 50% off on your first year at monarchmoney.com when you use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Real quick before I get into segment 2, Blackhawks fans, I have an important request for all of you. Locked On wants to hear more from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and to make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey in order to get started, and everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey, and you can also easily find the link down in the show notes of today's episode. Thank you all again for helping us out. Segment 2 on today's episode, the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, Blackhawks fans, went down this weekend in St. Paul, Minnesota. The Hawks opened up their first of 2 scrimmages on Saturday night against the St. Louis Blues and then closed out the showcase with a game on Sunday afternoon against the host Minnesota Wild. Definitely wanted to get into my full takeaways from these 2 games, particularly the first one, though, coming on Saturday against the Blues, which resulted in a 3-2 overtime victory. And even if it is just a rookie tournament, just a prospect showcase, still always feels good to beat down on the Blues. And the Hawks got a couple of goals from a pair of unlikely goal scorers in regulation. Tage Harding opened up the scoring for Chicago, a big left-handed defenseman on the back end. And then Ryan Mast, who's on an AHL deal with the Rockford Ice Hogs, scored their second goal of the game. Oliver Moore, though, one of the top prospects in the organization, was the overtime hero, blowing past former Blues first-round pick Adam Jiricek on his way to scoring the overtime winner. But as far as my big takeaways here from the opening game for the Hawks at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, first and foremost, the studs played like studs. The big dogs played how you wanted them to here this weekend. Starting first was Sam Rinzel. I think he was probably the most noticeable Blackhawks prospect on the ice in this game. His speed was just, so evident, so clearly above, the level of the rest of the prospects that were out there on the ice. He was just so easily galloping and weaving through traffic, zone exits, buzzing through the neutral zone, entering the offensive zone with speed in order to set up opportunities. It was clear every time he was out there, and the guy just makes it look so effortless. He honestly, it looks like a gazelle out there with his size and the way that he just flows so naturally. But I really liked Rinzel's game. There were some hiccups along the way, but, for this being the first game-like action for a majority of these prospects in several months, it's kind of hard to critique these guys. But all in all, Sam Rinzel played the way you wanted to see Sam Rinzel play. And I thought he also showed off his offensive creativity, his passing, his playmaking abilities as well. Beautiful primary assist to set up Tage Harding for the Blackhawks opening goal of the game. Like I said, gave Tage a yawning net to shoot at with. Great little hesitation en route to, I think it might have been a no-look pass going from the right dot over to his other blue line partner. Like I said, completely fooled the Blues defenders and goaltender to give Harding a wide open net. So beautiful stuff that we saw from Sam Rinzel on Friday night. And then another right-handed defenseman, obviously on the roster, Artem Levshinov. I thought he played the part down on the second pairing as he was skating with fellow countrymate Dmitry Kuzmin. Harding and Rinzel were paired together on the top defensive pairing in the Blackhawks lineup in general. As I broke down in the final episode leading up to the showcase this weekend, all of the line combinations and defensive pairings that we saw the Blackhawks utilize in their scrimmage at Fifth Third Arena on Thursday, that did ultimately, as expected, wind up being the lineup here for this opening game against St. Louis. But on that second pairing, I thought Levshinov, like I said, played the part as well, looked comfortable, and he doesn't have the skating ability and isn't as fast as Sam Rinzel out there, but for how bulky he is, already over 200 pounds, got some good size to him too at about 6'2". He moves really well out there, and generated some good opportunities for both he and his teammates because of that skating ability. One in particular used a nice head fake and used his skating and his edges to bounce around a couple of defenders to get a shot on goal. But his speed was also super evident on a great back check to prevent a Blues breakaway attempt and wound up leading to a pretty harmless shot on Hawks goaltender Stanislav Berezhnoi, who I'll get to here in just a second. But I liked what I saw from Artem Levshinov as well. Probably didn't stand out as much as Sam Rinzel did, but a good showing from him nonetheless. And then, as I mentioned, Oliver Moore wound up with the overtime winner to give the Blackhawks the 3-2 victory, but his play was super noticeable even prior to that. I continue to be super impressed with, just the hustle that Moore shows on a consistent basis, right? Never lacking energy. That's always super prevalent. I like his determination and the grit that he has, even though he's not maybe the most physically sizable guy. He's got a decent frame to him. I think he's 6'1". But he engages hard in battles and is trying to win every single one of them. And then he also, we've known this as well, but brings some good skill to the table. But definitely his best asset is that speed. Speed absolutely kills, and that's what killed the St. Louis Blues on that overtime winner. And like I referenced, it was no slouch that Moore blew past in the Blues zone in order to generate that breakaway and score the game winner. Former first-round pick in the 2024 NHL draft, Adam Jiricek. So nice maneuver there. Nice way to finish Friday night for Sam Rinzel on a high note with that overtime winner. He, Rinzel, and Levshinov definitely stood out the way us Blackhawks fans wanted to here in this contest. Nick Lardis, I thought also, was pretty noticeable, made some nice passing plays. Definitely should have wound up with a goal in general here this weekend, but had a really good opportunity in this game on Friday night when the Blackhawks were on the power play, and it came in his wheelhouse right there on the right dot with a one-timer. I mean, if you follow the Brantford Bulldogs on X, if you follow my strictly Blackhawks account, Talkin' Hockey, where I post the goals and assists as well of usually basically all of the Blackhawks prospects, then Nick Lardis, that's his dojo. That's his comfort place. Scored so many goals like that the last couple of years in the OHL. Couldn't believe he didn't have one for the Blackhawks to get them on the board on Friday night. But altogether, Lardis stood out. I thought he made some nice, real savvy finesse passes, had a beautiful sauce to set up Merrick Vanacker in transition early on in the game. And he, is always going to struggle being somewhat of a smaller body in the scraps and being feisty in those one-on-one battles and getting in between the dots. But I do think he does a really good job of getting the puck out of harm's way. And altogether, it's clear that he thinks the game at a high level and recognizes what's going on out there. So some really good stuff from Nick Lardis. I thought altogether, he, Oliver Moore, and Merrick Vanacker, as they should be, were the best line for the Blackhawks on Friday night. Another forward prospect that stood out to me, someone I actually wrote up in one of my columns for Chicago Hockey Now last week as a potential sleeper prospect to keep an eye on, was 2025 third-round pick Nathan Bem. I really liked what I saw from Bem for the most part. The size and skill combination, we saw that on display. He had 2 or 3 real high quality chances to find the back of the net that unfortunately all got stopped. But I think he does a really good job of knowing where to go to give himself opportunities. And also with his size, I like to see that he's not afraid to crash the net and try to score those dirty goals. Had a really good opportunity while driving the net early in this game against the Blues as well. But altogether, liked what I saw from Nathan Bem. Definitely has to work on his acceleration. Takes him a little bit to get going, and he would have had a couple of more opportunities, I think, had his, quickness been a little bit better. Something he definitely has to work on as he'll be returning to the WHL, but definitely has a good size and speed combination. And speaking of a size and speed combination, AJ Spellacy, whenever he's rocking the Blackhawks sweater, if it's in training camp, the preseason, or the last 2 years at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, he's making his presence felt. That was the case on Friday on Saturday, and as I'll get to here in just a second, definitely on Sunday as well. But I thought Spellacy made some nice plays in this opener against the Blues. Probably his best chance came while the Hawks were shorthanded on a nice crisscross passing play while entering the offensive zone with Martin Misiak. Misiak dropped it to him, and then Spellacy utilized his wheels and his strength to kind of drive the net and get off a good opportunity. Just continues to show us that he has a good power forward mold and reason to believe that he can be an NHL player one day down the road. Last but certainly not least, I got to give a massive shout out to Stanislav Berezhnoi in net for the Blackhawks. He honestly might have been the best Blackhawks prospect here this weekend, and that's saying something considering Rinzel, Levshinov, Moore, and Marek Vanacker, another first-round selection. All of those guys were in action. Nick Lardis suited up here this weekend, but Berezhnoi, I thought, had a spectacular first showing here in North America with the Blackhawks. Definitely deserved to get that overtime win because the way that he played when the Blackhawks were a little bit sloppy right out of the gate, which shouldn't have been too surprising. The Blues had already played their opening game of the showcase on Friday night. The Blackhawks had not. They had a practice on Saturday morning as well and then had the flight. Definitely understood why they got off to a little bit of a sleepy and sloppy start, but Berezhnoi was massive right from the opening faceoff. The Blues did strike for an early goal, but it definitely could have been worse than 1-0 in the early going. And then late in the game as well, down the stretch of that third period, Berezhnoi made some massive saves to make sure this one got to overtime. A couple of them I shared on social media. So huge round of applause for Stanislav Berezhnoi. Looked really sharp, as I said, in his first appearance with the Blackhawks. Likely going to be backing up Drew Commesso with the Rockford Ice Hogs this year. And obviously he's behind, Commesso, Soderblom, Spencer Knight clearly with the Blackhawks as well. But for being only 22 years old and a kid who's not going to turn 23 until next summer, he's put together some really good seasons back-to-back in Russia's VHL, which is kind of equivalent to the AHL over there in Russia. This was, I think, a sneaky good undrafted free agent signing here by general manager Kyle Davidson. Good stuff this weekend from Stanislav Berezhnoi. Definitely worth keeping an eye how he fares with the Rockford Ice Hogs in his first season with the AHL as well. But game 2 for the Blackhawks against the Minnesota Wild on Sunday, unfortunately, wasn't as noteworthy as the opening game on Saturday night, as because Rinzel, Levshinov, and Moore fared so well, none of them were in the lineup for the Blackhawks. Clearly the coaching staff in the front office had seen enough to feel comfortable about where they're at heading into training camp here this week. And then Zeev Buium also didn't suit up for the Minnesota Wild. So definitely not as entertaining of a game as we saw on Friday, but regardless, still want to get into a couple of quick takeaways here. Wound up being a 3-2 loss for the Blackhawks to Minnesota. They actually led 2-1 early on in the third period after a nice goal by Ryan Gagne in front, who's on an AHL deal with Rockford. Nick Lardis tried to stuff one home after a shot from Jack Pridham banked off the end boards, bounced towards the front of the net. Looked like while Lardis was trying to stuff it home, the puck might have jumped over his blade, but Ryan Gagne was right there on the spot. That gave the Blackhawks a 2-1 lead, but unfortunately they weren't able to hang on to it down the stretch, with Minnesota striking with just 1:01 left in regulation to take the 3-2 victory. I already mentioned AJ Spellacy. He was definitely one of the most noticeable players in this game on Sunday. Made some really nice hits and just being physical as he always is out there on the ice. Skating was shown off a couple of times as well, but maybe the biggest thing he did was get into a fight with Minnesota Wild defensive prospect Rowan Top. Good showing for Spellacy there as well. He did not actually play in the third period of this game, which was a little bit concerning for a stretch there, but kind of similarly to what happened to him earlier this week when he got a skate blade to the face, but fortunately dodged a scary injury there and just suffered a small cut that just needed some glue in order to heal up. Spellacy, avoided a serious injury this weekend here as well. Nothing was wrong with him. Just held out to a precautionary measure, but definitely thought when he was on the ice, he was, as he always is, making his presence felt. The Blackhawks' opening goal of the game was scored by Ryan Green, who I thought early on was just trying to do a little bit too much. Had some turnovers in the neutral zone and when trying to enter the offensive zone. I know it's been a while for him, but to do it repeatedly that many times was a little bit concerning and frustrating, but Love to see Ryan Green bounce back in a nice way by scoring a beautiful goal while entering the offensive zone with speed and beating the Wild goaltender cleanly. And then last but certainly not least, want to give, again, a shout out to Nick Lardis. Had a couple more chances to find the back of the net here in this one, but unfortunately the puck just wouldn't go. But altogether, definitely thought he belonged in the group of upper class prospects for the Blackhawks here this weekend. Not that it's, super noteworthy because he was facing off against prospects and not going up against grown men, but Nick Lardis did what we wanted to see him do here this weekend and created opportunities for his teammates with some nice passing plays. I thought his speed looked really good. Altogether, coming off of, an injury that he suffered late last season, he looked fully healthy, looked good, and definitely could have scored, 1 or 2 goals easily for the Blackhawks here this weekend as well. So there are all my takeaways from the Blackhawks prospect at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. Oh, no, that is not my last takeaway. I'm sorry. I gypped Owen Flores here. I apologize. He wasn't quite as good as Stanislav Berezhnoi was on Saturday night, but Owen Flores, who's on an AHL deal with the Rockford Ice Hogs, signed this summer, he was darn good in between the pipes for the Blackhawks. The goaltending that the Hawks got this weekend was spectacular. Owen Flores stood on his head, gave his team an opportunity to win. Unfortunately, they just didn't do enough in front of him. They only potted 2 goals and, like I said, gave up a toughie after a bad giveaway in the defensive zone with 1 minute and 1 second left in regulation. But shout out to Owen Flores for looking sharp in net as well, following up Stanislav Berezhnoi's sharp performance on Saturday night. But that's everything I got from the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, Blackhawks fans. Coming up in just a moment, before I close out today's episode, still got to react to the NHL Network's top prospect pools. But first, I got to show some love to another one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season has now fully arrived, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's super quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. With player props, same game parlays, and more ways than ever to get in on the action, go and check out FanDuel right now by visiting FanDuel.com or downloading the FanDuel app to get started. And again, if your first $5 bet wins, you can get $300 worth of bonus bets. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Segment 3, not too long ago here on the show, I went through Corey Pronman of The Athletic's top NHL pipelines rankings, while the NHL Network, who I've seemingly been going through their lists on the show day in and day out because they just keep dropping them and they keep involving the Chicago Blackhawks, so I got to keep talking about them here. They also, late last week, dropped their own top prospect pool rankings, with the Chicago Blackhawks kicking things off at #1. I do need to preface, though, right off the jump that this is a prospect pool ranking compared to Pronman's pipelines rankings, where Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, they were in consideration for Chicago. Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, they were in consideration for the San Jose Sharks. Matvei Michkov was in the picture for the Philadelphia Flyers. Dylan Guenther, Logan Cooley for the Utah Mammoth, right? Those guys, not in consideration for the NHL Network's top prospect pool. However, again, this just goes to show how strong of a position the Blackhawks are at moving forward, because while they do have high-level guys on the NHL scene already, like Bedard, like Frank Nazar, Kevin Korchinski wasn't part of this list either because he's been on the professional scene for a couple of years. They're still in a real nice spot. Coming in at #1, and the prospects that NHL Network, mentioned specifically for Chicago were Sam Rinzel, Anton Frondel, Artem Levshinov, Brinzel was a late first-round pick, but 3 first-round selections for the Blackhawks, and then Sasha Boisvert and Oliver Moore, 2 other first-round selections. Love to see the inclusion of Sasha Boisvert on this list, who I believe is just going to have such a massive year with Boston University before likely going on to sign his ELC with the Blackhawks. I think this guy has the potential to be a good goal-scoring, two-way second-line player for Chicago. Then obviously Oliver Moore joins Sam Rinzel and Artem Levshinov in Blackhawks prospects who are trying to make the opening night roster here in training camp. San Jose does come in next at number 2, but of course, like I said, there's no Macklin Celebrini. There's no Will Smith on this list. So the prospects included from NHL Network were Michael Misa, Sam Dickinson, Igor Chernyshov, Quentin Musty, and Joshua Ravensbergen. And to just compare those 5 prospects and I guess some of the other high-end prospects that weren't mentioned in both of these two organizations, undoubtedly, the Blackhawks have the better defensive prospect pool. Make no mistake about it. I think Sam Dickinson is going to be a really good player, but they simply don't have the depth on the back end that the Blackhawks have. And they only listed Rinzel and Levshinov here on this list. There's other guys that can be included here as well, but not technically prospects at the same point in time. San Jose with Michael Misa, I do think he's the best forward prospect between these two teams, and adding him to Macklin Celebrini along with Will Smith, while also having Sam Dickinson on the back end and then a goalie and Joshua Ravensbergen, including all of them, I do understand why they were first over the Blackhawks and Corey Pronman's pipeline rankings. But without those two guys, I think just from a depth perspective, I would give the edge to the Blackhawks. However, I do still feel that Michael Misa undoubtedly is going to be the best players that were listed here by NHL Network. Coming in at number 3, the Montreal Canadiens, who are also listed highly by Corey Pronman. Ivan Demidov, since he's only played in a couple of NHL games at this point in time, was part of the list for Montreal. David Reinbacher, another prospect that was mentioned by NHL Network. Michael Hage, first-round selection in 2024. Jacob Fowler, one of the best goalie prospects in the NHL as well. Definitely understand why the Montreal Canadiens come in this highly. At number 4 is a team that wasn't in the top 10 for Corey Pronman's U23 rankings, but I did bring them up as one of the notable omissions, and it's the St. Louis Blues, who we just saw in action here this weekend. Jimmy Snuggerud, still technically considered a prospect at this point in time, even though he's played NHL games, but looks like he could be a really good offensive piece and goal scorer for the Blues long term. They just signed Justin Cabano in the first round of this year's draft, another right-handed good goal-scoring forward. Dalibor Dvorsky is a dangerous offensive piece as well. And then Otto Stenberg, David Jiricek, Theo Lindstein, right? The Blues kind of quietly have put together a sneaky good prospect pool. So I get them coming in here at number 4. I don't know if they have that one necessarily stud of the group here. Jimmy Snuggerud is probably the most likely to be that of this group, but I think he's going to be more of a goal scorer than a playmaker at the next level. At number 5, the NHL Network had the Anaheim Ducks, led by Roger McQueen and Beckett Seneca. Is now obviously guys like Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish have made the leap to the NHL. Cutter Gauthier is also there as well. At number 6, the New York Islanders, basically led by their 2025 draft class and Matthew Schaefer, Victor Eklund, and Kashawn Aitchison. At number 7 is the Minnesota Wild, led by Zeev Buium and Danila Yurov. At number 8, the Utah Mammoth with Caleb Denoyer, Tija Ginla, Dmitry Simashev, Michael Harabel, Cole Baudouin, and Daniil Boot. I feel like this is still a little bit low for Utah. Even though there's no Gunther, no Cooley, I'd probably still have them at number 6 at the lowest. Number 9 is the Washington Capitals, led by Ryan Leonard, Andrew Crystal, and Cole Hudson. And then rounding things out at number 10 were the Calgary Flames with Zane Parekh, Cole Rezhny, Henry Brishtevitz, and then Samuel Hanzek. So that takes care of the NHL Network's top 10 current prospect pools. Our Chicago Blackhawks lead the way at number 1. Let me know in the comment section if you agree. Without Connor Bedard for Chicago and Frank Nazar, and without Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith for the San Jose Sharks, do you think the Blackhawks have the better prospect pool between the two teams? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast as well. That way you can get all of the latest episodes as soon as they become available. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Check me out on X at Jack Bushman2, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Till tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.